What if everything you thought about power was wrong? For centuries, we've been told the same story. Be ruthless. Show no mercy. Never let them see you sweat. Machiavelli taught us to be feared rather than loved, to crush our enemies before they crush us. But what if I told you that the most dangerous people in any room aren't the ones with the iron masks, but the ones who know exactly when to take them off? Welcome back to Dark Wisdom, where we explore the uncomfortable truths about power, influence, and human nature. I'm your guide through the shadows, and today, we're going to shatter everything you think you know about strength, because here's the truth that the power-hungry miss. Machiavelli was right about power, but he left out the biggest secret. True strength doesn't come from an impenetrable facade. It comes from something far more calculated, far more dangerous. It comes from strategic vulnerability. You've been taught to hide your weaknesses, to project an unshakable image, to never show the cracks in your armor. But in the next 20 minutes, I'm going to show you how the most influential people in history have weaponized their vulnerabilities, turning perceived weaknesses into instruments of control. This isn't about being soft. This is about understanding the dark psychology of influence at its deepest level. Are you ready to unlock a form of power that most people will never understand? Then let's begin. Section 1. The Iron Mask of Power Picture. A CEO stands before their board, never admitting uncertainty. A politician refuses to acknowledge any mistake. A leader who never shows emotion, never reveals doubt, never lets anyone see behind the carefully constructed image. We worship these figures, don't we? Society has conditioned us to equate power with invincibility. The stoic warrior, the ruthless businessman, the unshakable leader who stands unmoved while the world burns around them. And on the surface, it makes perfect sense. From childhood, we learn that showing weakness invites attack. In nature, the wounded animal gets picked off by predators. In business, a moment of hesitation can cost you everything. In social dynamics, vulnerability is often punished with ridicule or exploitation. So we build our masks. We construct elaborate facades. We spend enormous energy maintaining an image of absolute strength, absolute certainty, absolute control. But here's what the architects of the Iron Mask don't tell you. This strategy has a fatal flaw, because while you're busy projecting invincibility, something insidious is happening. You're isolating yourself. People don't connect with perfection, they suspect it. They can't relate to someone who never struggles, never doubts, never fails. And in the absence of connection, you get something far more dangerous than respect. You get distance. Your subordinates stop telling you the truth because they fear your judgment. Your peers view you with suspicion because they can't read your intentions. Your allies remain superficial because they never feel they truly know you. The Iron Mask becomes a prison. And here's the darkest irony of all. The very thing you built to protect your power becomes the thing that makes it brittle, fragile, unsustainable, because power built on fear alone crumbles the moment you show the slightest crack. And every mask eventually cracks. Section 2. Machiavelli's unexpected twist. Now, let's talk about the man himself. Niccolò Machiavelli. The name has become synonymous with ruthless manipulation, with cold calculation, with the phrase, the ends justify the means. But here's what most people miss when they pick up The Prince. Machiavelli was far more sophisticated than the caricature we've made of him. Yes, he advocated for ruthlessness when necessary. Yes, he understood that a leader must sometimes be feared. But buried within his writings is a paradox that most readers overlook. In chapter 15 of The Prince, Machiavelli writes something fascinating. He says that while a leader must be willing to act immorally when necessary, they must also appear virtuous to gain popular support. It's not enough to be strong, you must be perceived as having the qualities that people admire. But here's where it gets interesting. Machiavelli understood that pure, unrelenting ruthlessness creates resentment. It breeds conspiracies. It makes enemies of everyone around you. Look at Cesare Borgia, one of Machiavelli's key examples. Yes, he was brutal. But Machiavelli praised him not just for his cruelty, but for his ability to appear as a liberator. Borgia would commit necessary violence, then distance himself from it, appearing as the one who restored order, not the one who created chaos. This is strategic vulnerability at work, even if Machiavelli didn't name it explicitly. Consider another passage where Machiavelli discusses how a prince should handle generosity. He warns against being too generous because it depletes resources, but he also warns against being seen as miserly. The solution? Be strategic about when you show generosity, making each act of giving more memorable, more impactful. Do you see the pattern emerging? Machiavelli understood that power isn't a blunt instrument. It's a scalpel. And sometimes the most surgical move is to show exactly the right amount of human vulnerability at exactly the right moment. This isn't weakness. This is weaponized authenticity. This is understanding that the person who controls the narrative of their own imperfections is far more dangerous than the person who pretends to have none, because when you reveal your vulnerabilities strategically, you're not being honest, you're being tactical. You're choosing which weaknesses to expose, when to expose them, and to whom. You're creating an illusion of authenticity that's more calculated than any mask could ever be. Section 3. The paradox unveiled. Strategic vulnerability. So let's expose this paradox completely. Let's pull back the curtain on how strategic vulnerability actually works as an instrument of power. First, understand this fundamental truth. Humans are hardwired to trust people who seem authentic. It's a survival mechanism. In our evolutionary past, the ability to gauge whether someone was being genuine could mean the difference between a trustworthy ally and a dangerous enemy. But here's the manipulation at the heart of strategic vulnerability. You can trigger that trust response deliberately. When a leader admits to a past failure, something interesting happens in the observer's brain. Mirror neurons fire, empathy engages, psychological defenses lower. In that moment, the leader transforms from a distant authority figure into a relatable human being, and relatable human beings can influence us in ways that intimidating figures never can. Let me give you a dark psychology framework for understanding this. The vulnerability hierarchy. At the bottom are surface-level vulnerabilities, admitting you're nervous before a big presentation, sharing that you had a difficult childhood, revealing a minor past mistake. These create connection without significant risk. In the middle are calculated exposures, revealing a weakness that actually makes you more relatable to your specific audience. A tech CEO admitting they didn't finish college. A fitness influencer showing their body before transformation. These vulnerabilities are chosen specifically because they create deeper bonds with the target demographic. At the top are strategic confessions, admitting to failures or flaws that are either already known or inevitable. This is the most Machiavellian use of vulnerability because you're getting ahead of potential attacks by controlling the narrative yourself. Here's a real example. When Howard Schultz returned to Starbucks as CEO in 2008, the company was failing. Instead of projecting confidence and making excuses, he did something remarkable. He publicly admitted that Starbucks had lost its way, that they had prioritized growth over quality, that he had made mistakes. This wasn't weakness. This was strategic brilliance. By admitting the obvious problems before anyone could accuse him, he accomplished 3 things. He disarmed critics. He created a narrative of redemption where he was the hero. And he gave everyone, employees, customers, investors, permission to believe in the comeback story. That's the power of strategic vulnerability. It transforms you from someone defending a position into someone on a journey that others want to join. Now, let's go deeper into the dark psychology at work here. When you never show vulnerability, people are constantly trying to find your weaknesses. They're probing, testing, looking for the crack in the facade. It's exhausting to defend against, and it creates an adversarial dynamic. But when you strategically reveal certain vulnerabilities, you do something counterintuitive. You satisfy that curiosity. You give people what they're looking for, but on your terms. They feel like they've seen behind the curtain, that they know the real you, except they don't. They know exactly what you want them to know. This is the same principle con artists use when they create elaborate backstories filled with hardship and struggle. The vulnerability isn't real. It's engineered to create a specific response. I'm not saying you should lie or fabricate vulnerabilities. What I'm saying is that everyone has real weaknesses, real struggles, real moments of failure. The question is, Are you going to let those vulnerabilities be used against you? Or are you going to weaponize them for influence? The most dangerous people understand that authenticity itself can be a performance. Not a lie, but a carefully curated truth. Section 4. Real-world applications. Let's bring this out of theory and into practice. How are the most influential people actually using strategic vulnerability in the real world? The boardroom consider Satya Nadella, who transformed Microsoft when he became CEO. In his early days, he did something that shocked people. He admitted that Microsoft had become arrogant and out of touch. He openly discussed the company's failures in mobile and social media. This wasn't accidental. By naming the problems everyone could see, he established credibility. By showing humility, he made it possible for a massive organization to change direction. Employees who had been defensive about Microsoft's decline suddenly felt permission to acknowledge reality and work towards something better. Compare this to CEOs who double down on failing strategies, who blame external factors, who never admit error. They might preserve their ego, but they lose their companies. Strategic vulnerability gave Nadella something far more valuable than appearing infallible. It gave him the ability to actually change the organization. Social media and influence. Look at how modern influencers have mastered this principle. The most successful don't just show their highlight reels. They strategically reveal struggles, failures, and behind-the-scenes difficulties. But pay attention to which vulnerabilities they show. A fitness influencer will show their cheat meals and their bad days, but probably not their financial struggles or relationship problems. A business coach will share stories of past failures, but in a way that ultimately demonstrates resilience and eventual success. This is calculated. They're revealing just enough vulnerability to create parasocial connection, to make followers feel like they're getting the authentic version, while still maintaining authority in their specific domain. The person who gets this right gains something extraordinary, an audience that feels personally invested in their success. Not just followers, but advocates who will defend them against criticism, buy their products, and spread their message. Political power throughout history. The politicians who created the most fervent followings weren't the ones who projected perfection. They were the ones who positioned themselves as fighters who had overcome adversity. Think about political narratives, the log cabin origin story, the candidate who overcame poverty or discrimination, the leader who survived a scandal and emerged humbled. These aren't accidents. They're strategic deployments of vulnerability to create deeper connection. Ronald Reagan was called the Teflon president, not because he never showed weakness, but because when he did, whether admitting he didn't remember details during Iran-Contra or joking about his age, he did it in ways that made him more likable rather than less competent. Barack Obama's 2008 speech on race, where he discussed his own complicated relationship with racial identity, turned a potential campaign disaster into one of the most memorable moments of his candidacy. Donald Trump built an entire political movement partly on claiming to be attacked by elites and media, positioning himself as vulnerable to the same forces his base felt vulnerable to. The vulnerability is strategic, chosen specifically to resonate with the target audience. Negotiation and conflict. Here's a dark application. In negotiation, strategic vulnerability is devastatingly effective. When you enter a negotiation and immediately acknowledge a weakness in your position, something fascinating happens. The other side relaxes slightly. They think they understand the power dynamic. They become more willing to find middle ground because they don't feel like they're being manipulated. But if you've chosen your vulnerability carefully, admitting something they would have discovered anyway, or revealing a weakness that's actually not critical to your core objectives, you've used that moment of openness to build trust while protecting your actual interests. I've seen deal makers admit they're under time pressure, creating urgency, while hiding that they have alternative options. I've seen salespeople confess that their product isn't perfect for every use case, building trust, while steering the conversation toward the specific use case, where it excels. This is Machiavellian strategy wearing the mask of honesty. Personal relationships. Even in personal relationships, Understanding strategic vulnerability changes everything. The person who never admits fault, never shows insecurity, never reveals struggle, they create relationships built on performance rather than connection. And those relationships are fragile. But the person who strategically reveals vulnerability, sharing struggles at the right time, admitting mistakes when they're not catastrophic, showing appropriate amounts of need without becoming dependent, they create bonds that withstand enormous pressure. I want to be clear. I'm not advocating for manipulation in genuine relationships. But understanding the principle helps you recognize when others are using it against you, and it helps you build authentic connections more effectively. Because even in authenticity, there's strategy. Even in genuine vulnerability, there's choice about what, when, and how much to reveal. Section 5, Beyond the Mask, Sustainable Influence. Now we arrive at the ultimate question. Why does this matter for long-term power? Because there's a massive difference between compliance and commitment, between fear and loyalty, between short-term domination and sustainable influence. History is littered with powerful figures who ruled through pure intimidation. And history shows us what happened to most of them. Assassination, overthrow, abandonment the moment their power wavered. Why? Because power built solely on fear has a fatal flaw. It requires constant enforcement. The moment you can't back up your threats, the moment you show actual weakness, everything collapses. Your allies become enemies. Your subordinates become betrayers. But power built on strategic vulnerability, power that includes genuine connection, alongside calculated strength. That kind of power is resilient. When people feel they know you, when they feel invested in your success, when they believe they understand your motivations, they don't just follow you because they have to. They follow you because they want to, and that's sustainable influence. Let me give you the dark truth at the heart of this. The most enduring forms of control are the ones people don't realize are control. The most powerful influence is the kind people embrace. Voluntarily, strategic. Vulnerability creates this because it makes your agenda feel like a shared journey, rather than an imposed vision. Think about cult leaders throughout history, and I use this as an extreme example of the principle. The most effective ones didn't rule through constant intimidation. They created environments where followers felt special, chosen, part of something meaningful. And they did this partly by revealing exclusive vulnerabilities, by sharing secret struggles that made followers feel like insiders. I'm not advocating cult leadership. I'm showing you the dark psychology principle. Vulnerability, when deployed strategically, creates insider status. And insider status creates loyalty that force never could. In your own life, whether you're leading a team, building a personal brand, navigating corporate politics, or simply trying to increase your influence. Integrating this paradox changes everything. You become less defensive because you're not protecting a facade that could crumble. You become more adaptable because you're not locked into a rigid image. You build relationships that can withstand conflict because they're based on something deeper than pure transaction. And paradoxically, by embracing strategic vulnerability, you become more powerful precisely because you're no longer trapped by the exhausting need to appear invincible. This is the Machiavellian paradox at its deepest level. The ultimate strength is knowing when and how to show weakness. The ultimate control is making people choose to be controlled. The ultimate mask is the strategic decision to remove it. So here's your challenge as you go forward. Look at your own life. Where are you wearing an iron mask? Where are you exhausting yourself maintaining a facade of strength? And more importantly, where could you strategically reveal vulnerability to actually increase your influence? Remember, this isn't about being weak. This isn't about oversharing or making yourself a target. This is about understanding that power is theater, and the best actors know when to show their characters' humanity to make the performance more compelling. Machiavelli taught us that the ends justify the means. But what if the most effective means isn't the sword or the crown, but the carefully calculated moment when you show you're human? That's true dark wisdom. That's the paradox that most people will never understand. And now that you do, you have access to a form of influence that transcends simple intimidation. Use it wisely. Use it strategically. And never forget, the most dangerous person in any room is the one who knows exactly when to take off the mask. If this video challenges your understanding of power, hit that like button. Subscribe to Dark Wisdom for more explorations of the uncomfortable truths about influence and control. And drop a comment below. Have you ever seen strategic vulnerability used masterfully? Or have you been manipulated by someone weaponizing their weakness? Until next time, remember, in the shadows of power, nothing is what it seems. And that's exactly where we thrive.